Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I tell you, this is something that I've looked forward to the entire year. It's FASREC, and it's all about physical activity, sport and recreation for postgraduate studies at the Northwest University. Thank you so much for tuning in. I tell you, every time I speak to these people, all these experts in FASREC, I'm fascinated by their world and what they do. It's incredible to listen to the wide array of different topics and things that they discuss and research studies that they participate in. If after this hour you are not interested in doing your postgraduate studies, then call us, because you must have then missed something. We have a whole team of people, a whole team of experts here to talk to you today about physical activity and sport and recreation and so on. I have three people on stage here with me, Hanli, Tron and Adele, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them a little bit later on. And then we have a whole group of people. I'll introduce them one by one. We have a whole group of people that'll link up via Zoom, just to prove that we have this whole online thing going even in FASREC. Right next to me we have the director of FASREC, Professor Hanli Moss. Hanli, thank you again for allowing us a glimpse into your world and for bringing your whole team with us. Perhaps let's start with a bit of an overview of FASREC. What is it that you guys do?
Thank you, Gepe. We've also been looking forward. This is quite a highlight of our year to engage with prospective students that want to come and do their postgraduate studies. So FASREC, we say our slogan is your active living starts here. And we research human movement from the cradle to the grave. So that means we have a focus on children from birth till 12, which is mostly our lectures in kinetics and looking at physical activity, developmental control delays in children that do not perform at school or do not have the gross motor abilities, and what are the factors that play a role. They also investigate children that have obesity and can later develop health issues. Then we have our biokineticists in the group that look more to the adults, to prevention and treatment of non-communicable diseases. We have some research on orthopedic injuries and sports injuries. We have a whole new exciting focus coming up on biomechanics, which will link our sport performance and our health together. So that's quite exciting going forward. Biomechanics. And then we have recreation, which is also part of FASREC. And Tron will tell you more about that, but they're quite unique in the country because there are very few universities still training people for recreation and leisure and therapeutic recreation. So I think there's a vast array of topics and research interests.
It's incredible. It's quite an extensive scope. I mean, if you say from the cradle to the grave, I mean, I can just think for myself, I mean, as someone that's not in your field, it must be incredible because there are so many different aspects to study. So it really, if someone has a theme or an idea in their minds, you'll most probably be able to cater for it.
Yes, and then of course we link up with the other research entities in our faculty as well.
For a transdisciplinary thing?
Yes,
yeah.
So we have some current projects where we link up with pharmacy, we have some with nutrition, with the hypertension group. So it's not just physical activity in FASREC, but also how it relates to some of the other subject and entities in the Faculty of Health Sciences. And we have a very exciting project coming up with engineering. So we're working towards the Robotics Olympics for 2024.
A Robotics Olympics?
Yes.
I wasn't even aware of it.
You weren't aware of this, I just told you now. Yes.
All right, so Hanli, we'll come back to the logistics and a little bit more from your side later on. I'm very curious about the methodologies and how exactly you go on in taking that dissertation on. How do you go about doing it and so on. So we'll get to the specifics of the research process a little bit later on. But ladies and gentlemen, I tell you the experts are here, so let's hear from the horse's mouth, as it were, as to what they do. Let's start with Tron. Tron, as you've heard now, focuses on recreation, and immediately recreation sounds wonderful.
Well, it is quite an interesting field, and I think it's something that every one of us has to do on a daily basis. Specifically in our program, we look at the activities that people do when they're not working, when they actually have the free time and they want to participate in those activities. So it's a bit removed from the sport and the sports science and the competitive sport. It is for every person who wants to be active in a hobby, and it's not just physical activity, it is hobbies. It can be art, anything that really interests you during your free time.
Now, Tron, you've just expanded the range of themes even more so.
And then within recreation, we also have therapeutic recreation, which is an emerging field, where you look at how we can use recreation and leisure in a therapeutic way to assist people in their daily living.
So the recreation, just to make sure that I understand you correctly, you say it's hobby, but it's not just recreational sport. It's not just people going for a jog. It's like people doing painting or whatever.
Yes. So we look at, for example, what the benefits are that they get through their participation, but also we can look at the constraints they experience, things that hinder them from participating in these activities, and then also in a broader sense, what the local municipalities maybe can bring to improve the conditions so that people have safe environments to participate in their...
And infrastructure and so on.
All of those things.
Incredible. Yes. So the students that come to you, do they work from what? I assume it's both qualitative, quantitative. The approach most probably depends on the problem statement.
Yeah, it depends on the study and what they want to achieve, but yes, we've got qualitative and quantitative research and even mixed methods as well.
And you don't just look at the physical side of it, there's also, as you say, a policy side to it, but perhaps also a psychological thing?
Also looking at the psychological benefits. For example, a study that we did at the university, we looked at students' participation and their sense of belonging, and the reasons why they participate in these activities and their satisfaction with life as well. So it's not just the physical activity.
Thank you, Tron. Adele, to move on to you, what is it that you focus on? I heard something about sports science, or what is it?
So I'm a sports scientist, and so we look at anything that can enhance your sport performance, from the physiology, psychology. There's nutrition as well, biomechanics. So there's an array of facets that contribute to the performance that an athlete will see on the field. And so yes, that's where we go into intervention studies, pre-post testing, qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods as well. So yes.
So if you're about the performance, I can only assume that you get down to the nitty-gritty. Because especially if you're on a level, you would know better now, but if you're on a very high level as a sports person, to improve your performance, it might be a small tweak that needs to be made.
Exactly. Yeah, so that 0.01%, which might not be significant statistical, can be the difference between a win and or a lose.
Yeah.
A gold medal versus a 10th place on a 100-meter sprint. So that's really, as you say, we look at that finer details, the tweaking details in order to enhance their performance at the end of the day.
So I've seen in spin bowling, in cricket for example, just how the bowler holds the ball at the release point can make a huge difference on the number of revolutions and so on. So that's the sort of thing that you would be interested in as well.
Exactly, exactly. So that will encompass, for instance, some video footage that we will take and analyze the video footage, encompassing some biomechanical analysis, speed, how many revolutions, what is the torque that the bowler sets out, and then they might tweak it, the bowler might tweak it to say, okay, the next ball release will be fast or slower. So everything is, on TV it looks like, wow, that was a very good over, but everything is scientifically compiled.
So, Tron and Adele, on the studies that you work with, obviously it has a direct impact on the research subject, the person that you're working with, the focus, the sports person, or whoever does in some other thing in recreation and so on. But you approach it from a master's or PhD study perspective. So I assume it's not just focused on one individual. If I were a postgraduate student, I'd most probably have to have a sample and so on of several people. Tron?
Yes, once again, it depends on the type of study you want to do. The qualitative studies, you can use a smaller sample. 24 people will be enough, but some of the other studies will require 700 people if you're going to quantitative data that you want to gather. It all depends on what you really want to achieve through your research.
So in the end, you become a true master of that field. I mean, if you can enhance performance of long-distance athletes, for example, I mean, you're not just going to focus on one person. You'll be able to what? Consult? What do you end up doing?
Yes, so we usually say there's two legs. So you have the research leg, so you want to elaborate and expand the literature and the research on that specific topic, but also to give back on the athletes. So at the end of the day, those athletes will have the necessary tools to enhance their performance. So that is how we can also bring the practical or our practice into the research as well.
Okay, thanks Adele. Thank you, Tron. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to focus now on some of the other experts within the under the umbrella of FASREC, and I'll introduce them one by one. I'll basically ask them, you know, what they focus on and let them speak, and then we'll engage further from there. Let's start with Christo Bischoff. Christo, thank you for participating today. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Hi, Harry. Thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, I'm Dr. Christo Bischoff, and I also work at FASREC. I'm also a sports scientist. You know, I've been wondering about how a good night's sleep will actually... let me just start my video. Thanks so much. All right. So again, I'm Dr. Christo Bischoff. This is me in person. And I've been wondering last year or so, how a good night's sleep impacts your performance. We all know that a good night's sleep can have a huge impact on whether you perform or do not perform well. The problem is that, you know, research has mainly been lab-based. You can only really see if a guy had a good night's sleep by analyzing the amount of REM sleep he had, amount of deep sleep, light sleep, the amount of hours, how did he feel. Other than that, you can only do this in a laboratory. And the sports application of this has been only used through subjective questionnaires. So by asking someone if they had a good night's sleep and then seeing if they had a good if they had a good performance on the field or on any type of sporting code, is really there's a lot of discussion about that just by asking someone from a subjective point of view. So my field of interest at this stage is quantifying what it means to have had a good night's sleep. The way we're going to do this is by actually measuring people within a sporting environment during a tournament. Technological advancements has made it so much easier for us in this sense that you can measure nocturnal heart rate variability, which is a gateway into a real gateway into the human body. We can measure this during a tournament just by using a heart rate monitor. So in short, we hope to actually measure if a guy had a good night's sleep while he's competing, and if that has any effect on his performance.
Christo,
so yeah, in short, that is.
Christo, I've got to ask you this. I tell you, every time I read up on people getting enough sleep and productivity and so on, the norm is 6 to 8 hours. But then I meet people who only sleep about 4 to 5 hours. Is there a norm? Just to set my nerves aside, because I'm worried about not sleeping enough or sleeping too much or what. Is there a norm?
There is norms for certain individuals. The 8-hour rule seems like it's not really the case. It's more between 6 and 7 hours. And I think we would consult the athletes at the Olympic Village to maybe lessen that to 4 or 5 hours, because I think it's going crazy in that village. But no, it differs from person to person, and really that's what we're trying to evaluate. How much sleep do you need, and what kind of sleep do you need to actually during your participation in a tournament?
Yeah.
How much do you need to perform? That's what I wonder.
Thank you, Christo. It's a fascinating world, and I know that Tron, Adele, you both love singing, so perhaps there is an avenue for you to explore, perhaps a few lullabies and good night. Perhaps a collaboration, but I won't ask you to sing right now. Next up, Kobus Oosthuizen. Kobus, tell us a little bit more about what you keep yourself busy with now.
Hello everyone, I'm Kobus Oosthuizen. I'm still busy with my own postgraduate studies. So I'm busy with my doctor's degree. I'm researching in the field of semi-professional and professional rugby. I'm investigating what the impact of GPS units have on the performance of the players. And that this is quite a broad spectrum, which focus largely on recovery and also on the physical factors that you do on a daily basis, which is mostly the absolute and relative speed profiles of an athlete, and how you apply that on a player or on a team to get the best results during training, and also to see if what you're doing in a training scenario are also carrying over to the match environment. So yeah, that in short is what are we doing. So I already gathered most of my data. So we will be looking in the internal and external factors influencing performance. In short, thank you.
Thank you, Kobus. Kobus, this is that little thingy that we see between the shoulder blades of the players, right?
Yes. Yeah. These days you will see all of the teams, the Springboks, and all the international teams have a pod in the back, and so they're just tracking all their movements and see how long they need to recover after a game, and if they did function at their peak performance during a game.
Yeah. It's incredible. I tell you, I've always wondered about those things and if they break easily and how robust they are. But Kobus will be able to tell you all about that, ladies and gentlemen. If you see it on TV, then think of Kobus, because he's the guy that knows a lot about what's going on with those GPS trackers. Thank you, Kobus. Next up, we have Danae Kutsia. Danae, tell us a little bit more about your world.
Hi, good morning, GP and colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity just to showcase a little bit of kinetics. Currently, I am busy in a lot of projects ranging, like Prof. Moore said, from zero, the babies, and their development till 13 years. But today I'm going to showcase the PhASRec study. As we all know, motor skills are the foundation of anything. So if a child's motor skills isn't correct, it will have an impact on their social skills, the emotional skills, the academic skills, as well as how they're going to act, be active. So what we want to do in the PhASRec is to get norms for low resource communities like South Africa, because most of the test batteries that we use is not norms from South Africa. So it's either UK or America. And then with this study that we do, we are in collaborating with UCT. So it's Cape Town. We want to go to the Free State, and we are in the Northwest Province. And we want to see exactly how the children's motor skills are. If we develop the program or the test battery, can teachers also do it? And then as well, we want to look at the perceived motor competence versus the actual motor competence of children. So that's in short the program or the research project that we are showcasing now.
Danae, so now my brain is running at 150%, because, you know, having kids myself, I know the debates that parents and teachers have about what is it, large motor skills or small, what do you call the different motor skills? Danae?
Growth motor skills.
Growth motor skills. I tell you, then people say, stop, put down your video game and go and play outside. So you'll have some more clarity, because in as you say, I'm not too sure how the South African environment fits into that field. I mean, not only do we have the unique South African context, but we also have in South Africa, I feel, many different contexts rolled into one. The urban environment, the rural environment, and so on. And that would be things that you look into.
Yes. Yes, it is. Just to answer your question regarding screen time, actually South Africa, according to the HAXA, scored very low. We got an F for sedentary behavior, so we really need to get our children moving. If you do play video games, try to do something with brain breaks or where the children are actually physical active while they play the games, then it's okay, because then they start training as well while they are busy. But I also think the problem is, especially in South Africa, with the different socioeconomic statuses, that especially in the low resource communities that you said, the children do not get enough stimulation to improve their motor skills. And if you do not improve your motor skills, then we will have problems for the next generation in sport. And that's where my sports science colleagues comes in to make sure that they get to the top 1%. So yes, I think that's what is very important. If you do go onto your screen time, please make sure it's limited. But if they do and they play video games, try to make it more interactive, that they do move as well.
Okay. I'll do my best, Danae. Thank you so much for your advice. I'm very curious as to the different contexts that her research would play in. I mean, Tron, you've mentioned policy development. Yeah. But I mean, even on this, we're talking about parks, you know, town and regional planning and so on.
Yeah. And I think I just want to flag this, that there's a lot of research on how being active and having motor skills also relate to academic performance. And I think we don't highlight that enough. For children to perform at school, they need to be active, because there's a cross-contamination taking place. And I know in countries like Mozambique that I know of, they learn maths and geography through physical activity, which I don't often find in our school system. So I think that's very important work, but they have to get the instruments ready for the South African context before we can really move forward.
All right. Thank you so much, Danae. Thank you, Hanli.
Thank you.
I think we'll talk forever, Danae, if we continue with you, but we have to get to some of the other experts as well. Samantha Kotz-Kramer. Samantha, tell us a little bit more about your world.
Hi, Glenn. Thank you so much for the introduction. I am busy working on my postdoc, and I am situated in FASREC. And my specific focus is working with my fellow colleagues, the lecturers, as we explore how best to develop future graduate attributes within the future human movement science specialists that will be graduating from our programs. So our specific focus is working with individuals in industry, or working with clients, lecturers, and students, as we identify the best ways in which we can develop students' entrepreneurial skills, so that when they enter the workforce, they are capable of contributing and starting their own businesses, or identifying entrepreneurial opportunities, also their communication skills and how to communicate on different platforms, to work with different individuals in industry that they might be communicating with, different types of professionals, and also to identify their own professional identities as human movement scientists. So our goal is to work with students and other key stakeholders, and to identify how best to develop the skill set of our students.
So Samantha, the graduate attributes, it's something that's very popular, not only in your field, but across the university. And what I've found is that we don't often find a clear trajectory of competence or skills ranging from your first degree to the master's and the PhD. That might be fascinating in your world to find out, you know, if we deliver graduates on a first degree basis, how the competence would change or develop to the master's and the PhD level.
Yes, we're busy looking at it from a first, second, third, and fourth year perspective. And then many of our master's and doctoral lecturers are also going to be looking at scholarship of teaching and learning with how best to work with specific students. So for example, with the master's students that I'm working with now, we're looking specifically at entrepreneurial skills and how best the undergraduate program is developing students to enter industry. So we're trying to connect postgraduate with the undergraduate programs and to find that streamline. But yes, you are right, Glenn. There is quite a lot of research to conduct in that area with 21st century attributes and how best to streamline it and make sure that when students do leave, we continue supporting them as best possible to become the specialists we know they can become.
Fascinating, Samantha. Thank you very much. I know that in the postgraduate environment, you know, a key question is also why should I do a master's or a PhD? We'll get to that a little bit later on. But it's wonderful to know that FASREC has people working on that issue and making sure that we deliver people that actually are relevant to the market and would be able to enter into the market. Thank you, Samantha. All right, Tamron Veldsman is up next. Tamron, thank you for joining us today. It's your turn.
Good day. Thank you so much for the opportunity and welcome to everyone watching. So what I'm busy with at this stage is we are focusing on evidence-based practice for a biokineticist. So looking at physical activity interventions in a rural community. We are going to look at a mobile technology intervention in a rural community to see how that affects their functional performance and also their knowledge on nutrition and physical activity. And then I have another project focusing on 2 different exercise modalities and to see what the effect thereof would be on the cardiovascular risk factors in middle-aged adults.
All right, so on the first one you've mentioned, Tamron, you focus then specifically on the biokineticist.
Yes, no, so we are focusing on the community members. We are biokineticists and we want to make sure that people are physically active and how the activity would influence their risk for developing non-communicable disease.
So studies in your field would typically be undertaken by biokineticists and obviously after completing their studies, they would become more relevant, more authoritative in the field that they're working in.
Yes, and we also want to make sure that we have the evidence to say this is why biokineticists should be in the public sector, because these are the effects on these health risk factors.
Do you find it difficult to get into the rural environments to conduct your research? I know that, you know, accessibility of your target population and of your sample is often a challenge for scientists. What's your experience in getting into that rural community?
So I have a collaborator at the University of Venda, and we have access to the community there. We are just looking at the COVID-19 regulations before we can start collecting data. So I think it's finding the right collaborators and having the right relationships with the community and also with the chief. I think that is how you start the process. So if you know how the process works, that will make it easier and accessible.
Tamron, good luck. Thank you very much for participating. It's wonderful, the work also that you are doing. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Now we have Henriette Hamill. Henriette, tell us a little bit more about your world.
Good day. Thank you for the opportunity. Good day to the colleagues and the prospective students. Like you've heard, my name is Henriette Hamill. I am a registered biokineticist and senior lecturer. My fields of interest are sport, rehabilitation, injuries, and orthopedics. Currently, I'm performing research on university-level netball players, where we investigate lower extremity injuries and associated risk factors. Due to the high demand and the popularity and the multi-directional movements of the sport, lower extremity injuries are increasing. So the aim or the main goal of this study will then be to identify these risk factors, lower them so we can improve individual and team performance. I would also like to add, we've got 2 spots for 2 master's degrees and 2 PhD degrees in this project. Furthermore, I would also like to add that our Varsity Cup netball players are in action in Stellenbosch this week, and you can see them at 1 o'clock against Kofsies. And if we win that game, it is definitely a breakthrough for our Northwest University netball players. Thank you for the opportunity.
Henriette, thank you so much, and also for your support for the Eagles playing today. Yeah, it's incredible. We're all following it. It's a wonderful tournament. It's a great thing happening. But Henriette, back to the academic side. You mentioned orthopedics, right?
Yes, that's right.
Tell us a little bit more about that. How does that play into what you do?
Sure. So orthopedics might not be directly related to the specific netball project that I'm doing, but orthopedics in general revolve around the musculature of the body. So we investigate, or we can look at the bones, the muscles, the nerve system, how they interact, specifically at joint and specific pathophysiology of certain joint injuries. So in the orthopedic modules that I teach, we can investigate a little bit more of the spinal injuries. You can look at scoliosis, kyphosis, lordosis, and other pathophysiologies regarding orthopedics and the spine.
So Henriette, you are situated in Potchefstroom. So FASREC would have the facilities available if someone needs to come in, you know, to do the examinations that you need to do?
Yes, FASREC does have all the facilities available, and I am situated in Potchefstroom. That's right.
Henriette, fascinating. Thank you so much. And we'll be done by 1 o'clock, so we'll all be watching then. Thank you, Henriette.
Thank you.
All right, last but not least, Marianne van Aswegen. Marianne, tell us a little bit more about your world.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Gepe, for the introduction. I've got 2 projects on my table at the moment, but I'll only speak about the one. If the students are interested, they can go and have a look at the other project, Exercise Oncology. It's available on the university website or the FASREC website. But I'd like to talk about my 4 signatures project that I'm launching along with Mr. John Stoffberg from the Institute for Biokinetics. As you know, every sport has its injuries, and these injuries can be a huge financial burden to teams. So the goal is for the teams to optimize their strength and conditioning regimes and to optimize rehabilitation. And this is done through a variety of movement screens, things like the wire balance, the functional movement screen, jump screenings. But then we question their sensitivity, their validity, and also their internal consistency to give us results. So at the moment, your gold standard is lab-based testing in predicting ACL injuries. Specifically, the counter movement jump has been proven to be a simple dynamic movement screen that is very applicable to identify athletes at risk for injury. And using a single force platform, we can define 3 sets of valuable kinetic data that can then that is derived from the counter movement jump, and that can tell us if an athlete is at risk for injury. Mayberry, and colleagues have gone so far to then use these 4 signatures, and seeing that there's a discrepancy in between the loading phase and the drive phase and the action phase, and then they've prescribed specific rehabilitative exercises in order to rehabilitate the injury. So our idea is to do a longitudinal study following a variety of sports at the university. So anything from cricket, rugby, netball, hockey, soccer, etc. And then to see, and this is now where the different directions for the project comes in, is there differences over the season between the, for the specific sport? Is there differences between the various sports? Are there positional differences within sports? For instance, in rugby, your forwards versus your backline players, do they have different force signatures? If the athlete has had previous injury, how would that affect their force signature? Have they rehabilitated enough, or can we still see that previous injury in their force signature? And then in addition to the counter movement jump, we might do upper body testing as well and see if there's a link between upper body and lower body mechanics and in specifically the force signatures. So I hope that the prospective students might be interested in this, and then they're welcome to contact me.
Marianne, I wanted to ask you about the different sporting codes, but you've answered that now. Now, the next question that pops in my mind is the longitudinal element in your study. If someone now, for example, wants to do a master's, they're going to pop in for about 2 to 3 years, but obviously you're going to have a longer run in this project. How would that work? Would they just slot in and do the master's as a component of the project?
Yes, so this is where they will have to say what their interest is. The idea is for us to follow it longitudinally for a variety of sports, and obviously that can be for the next 2-3 years. But for a master's student, you don't want to take so long to finish your master's, so they might come in for a specific season, for a specific sport, or whatever their options are.
Marianne, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but as a ginger, I'm naturally curious. So you've mentioned now 2 focal areas in your life, and you've told us about one, but now you can't leave us hanging. Tell us about that second one, just briefly.
Okay, very briefly, I introduced the exercise oncology project last year, and I think due to the COVID pandemic, the research in this area becomes a little bit harder to do. But we know that there is about 100,000 South Africans diagnosed with cancer every year, and females are at highest risk to develop breast cancer and also cervical cancer, while men have a higher risk to develop prostate and colorectal cancers. And then clinical adjuvant treatment is used to treat these cancers and may consist of surgical removal of the tumor, radiation, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, hormonal therapy, and then recently exercise is also being brought into the game. From a treatment perspective, they suffer from fatigue, nausea, depression and anxiety, low mood states, lowered physical fitness, and also a decreased perceived quality of life. So research has been done overseas in Germany, and Australia is a very big hotspot for exercise oncology research. And they found that performing or participating in an exercise regime is really beneficial for the cancer patients. So my idea for this project is to, the end goal would be to establish a exercise oncology research center where we would bring the patients in and help them throughout the treatment process, but also then perform research on the effects of exercise for them. The idea is to look at the general health effects of physical activity for specific cancers, such as lymphoma or breast cancer. And then another idea is that this patient often with chemotherapy, they struggle with neuropathies, and this has an effect on their gait. So the idea is to then do gait analysis and to do an intervention to see which exercise rehabilitation program would be the best for them to follow in addressing the neuropathy.
I tell you, I really hope those restrictions get lifted quite soon, and we can get rid of this, well, not perhaps in its entirety, but we can move on from COVID so that you can travel and people can travel to you. I think it's incredibly important work that you do. Thank you, Marianne. Hanlie and Tron and Adele, I tell you, it's a fascinating world that you find yourselves in.
And Tron also has a project on retirees in recreation that I think he can also share.
Because I've been listening to all of them, and your field is quite unique. I mean, they are leaning towards the more traditional, if I dare say, and you are doing groundbreaking work here.
So the one study or project that we currently are in the process of starting is looking at retirement and the retirement phases that you go through, and the role that recreation and leisure can play in it, but also the changes that occur in terms of your leisure and your recreation. during this phase. I'm not saying that you and I are getting old, but retirement is something that we should start thinking of. And what research has shown is that people who don't really have hobbies or any interests outside of work really struggle to adjust to retirement. Because if you just focus on work, you have your whole identity is created around your work. And then once you let go of that, you struggle to really come up with something meaningful. So we are looking at a longitudinal study, studying for people from a year prior to retirement, looking at their leisure interest, their work ethic, their physical activity, their psychological health, and then tracking it 3 or a year after retirement, because I think that is still a honeymoon phase, if we can call it that. It's new. You are exposed to all the freedom, not having to work. But then afterwards, for the next 3 years, then I think all of a sudden it becomes a reality that you have this time to fill and you don't really have anything to fill it with. So we are looking not only at the changes that occurs in terms of your recreation and leisure, but also how this leisure and recreation can influence your physical well-being, your functional ability, your psychological health as well.
There's a bit of irony there that your study on retirees is longitudinal by nature, but let's not go into that. All right, so let's get into the nature of study supervision at FASREC. Perhaps Adele, we can start with you. How do you guys approach it when you get a new student in and you have that whole supervisory relationship starting off and so on? How do you approach it?
I think it depends from supervisor to supervisor, and then also project versus project. You might get a PhD student that enrolls and their minds are set on a certain topic or an area that they want to specialize in. So they might not come on board with a project that is already written. So they will have to start compiling something from scratch. So that is more time that it has, that will take into or go into that process. So I think there will be more one-on-one sessions for them. But let's say all these projects that are listed today, and you get students that's enrolled already on that, there's already objectives set out. So they might come in and say, okay, my interest field are A, B, C, and D. How does it fit into the objectives listed? So that process will go a lot quicker then for the students. And I'm not saying go that way, that's just an option for students.
No, but it does help because there are clear targets.
Yes.
And especially with a full dissertation,
exactly.
You often get lost.
Exactly. So we spoke about it actually on yesterday, the feedback between supervisors and students. How often should it take place? Do you wait for the students to give feedback? Do you set reminders or meetings for your students? So predominantly postgrad studies, you work at your own pace. Okay, so if you want to finish your master's in a year, it's accomplishable. But the communication between the supervisor and the student is then of importance. Otherwise, if you want to do a study from scratch, it might take a bit longer. If it's a longitudinal study, as we heard, it can be 3 to 5 years. And I think it's just important to set your goals and your deadlines and timelines then.
I want to ask Thorn a little bit more about the actual process from research proposal and conceptualization of ideas. But before we do that, Thorn, in terms of support for these students, I mean, we're talking about different methodologies, so there must be some, I don't know, statistical support given. Or how do you support those postgraduate students?
Yes, thank you. I think over the years we've set up a nice program. So we will, once a student receives confirmation that they've been accepted as postgraduates, we set up an orientation day where students, we did it virtually the last 2 years, so we give them a bird's eye view of the whole research process, and we introduce them to all the support units, if I can say, like the library, statistical consultation, the writing, the laboratory, and on our learning management system, which is Ifundi. So there's a whole orientation day. We also do workshops on ethics, on how to draft your proposal. And then we have monthly workshops where we provide them with material which they can go through on their own time. And then we have a Q&A session where they can ask us questions with regards to that. We also try and structure these monthly workshops where they should be in the process. So within 1 year, we will cover the whole research process, from proposal to data capturing, to statistical analysis, to writing an article, to submitting. So we try and cover all the aspects, and students can choose, depending on where they are in the process, which workshops they attend. And the material stays available.
Sounds as if a student will have to try very hard to get lost.
Yes. But they still do get lost because they're students.
Yeah, the nature of students. And I think perhaps we must get Christo and Kobus to contribute here. Christo to help with the sleeping patterns of students, and then Kobus to track them, to know where they're going. I don't know, Christo and Kobus, will you be up for that or not yet? Christo?
Will.
And we could try identifying what's a good night's sleep for a student, and then see what the effect it has on their movement patterns. I think Kobus will help me there.
And
we'll try.
Yeah. Then later on we can get Samantha to see if they, have the right attributes. When. All right. Sorry, Tron. I'm losing focus here. Tron, I want to talk about that research proposal, because often, the research proposal is crucial. If the research proposal is not quite on target, then you struggle.
Definitely. Is your research proposal, that's the foundation of your whole study. If it's a weak foundation, the study will be, or might be, flawed, and you will probably have trouble to get your articles published or your outputs published. But if you have a proper, rigorous proposal, then everything will run smoothly. And I think often that is the thing that students struggle with, is to, within the timeline that they have, because there are restrictions on how long they can take to complete their proposals. I think that is something that students struggle with, maybe because their ideas are too wide and you have to narrow them down to a specific focus, or maybe it is just that in the undergrad years they didn't get the foundation of research methods that they struggle with. But as study leaders, we work with every student and ensure that they get a proper research proposal. And then it goes through the scientific committee that approves it. It is a committee within FASREC. And once that is approved, they can go to ethics and get ethics approval.
But I mean, you guys, you help them. I mean, you are all available. If someone in the community sees something that they want to focus on, they can email Tamrin, for example, and talk with her directly. Yeah.
I think, as Adele said, if you have a topic that you want to start from scratch, it will take a bit longer, because you have to conceptualize a whole new idea and get the literature for that. But if you fall into any of these projects that are currently available, I think it is just a lot easier, because the groundwork and the foundation is already there.
Only I'd like to get into the how and the why a little bit when it comes to masters and PhD. Let's start with your conversion from the typical dissertation, the masters and the PhD, into research output, specifically so articles, accredited journals, perhaps a policy document, and so on. How do you guys at FASREC work in that arena?
Okay, so we have masters and PhD by 100% research. I think I have to clarify that, because some have mini dissertations with modules, and they have to write exams. We don't have that. The second thing is we prefer to do it by article format. So we expect a master's student to draft 2 research articles, and that forms part with an introduction, a literature review, and a concluding chapter. The dissertation. For a PhD student, we expect at least 3 articles. The guidelines are that you just have to prepare the articles. They don't have to be accepted.
Because that's, of course, something you don't really have control over.
Because it takes too long, and that can hamper the student's completion time. For a PhD, they have to submit at least 1 article. It is a bonus, and it is possible for a PhD student to complete all 3 articles and have them published. We've had that before in FASREC, so it is possible. But we must also remember that our research is either full-time or part-time. And being a part-time student does have its negative effects. It means you take longer. Being full-time, I often would motivate a student to consider that. There are bursaries available, university bursaries. We have some supplementary faculty bursaries, and of course NRF, MRC, and a few other places you can apply to supplement. And if you can have a full-time bursary, you can also progress much faster and be more focused.
I have to congratulate you and your team. I think at universities, perhaps in South Africa, you don't often find a research entity that is so well prepared and ready and structured to guide the postgraduate student. It's as if you have everything in place. I mean, all the things you're talking about, from theme to output, I mean, to do a master's and PhD and then add the extra depth of an article that comes from it. It's incredible. It's really of value. It's more than just the degree.
And I think the students don't value the articles because they don't think they're going to need it or it's not important. But it is an aspect of being a master of something, is to be able to report on your findings in the end. So yes, part of that process is then to determine which journal and why. How do you decide which journal do you prepare your paper for? And I always tell students, I don't want to deter you, but the master's is the more difficult one than the PhD because you have to learn everything. You have to learn how to do research, you have to do the research and how to write it up. And in the PhD, you actually apply what you've learned in the master's.
Well, then you become a master and you continue on that journey. Yes. There's no reason for you to stop at the master's.
Yes.
All right, let's get to the nitty-gritty. If they are interested, what happens now?
So if any of you are interested, please visit our website at FASREC. We are in health sciences, the research entity for physical activity, sport and recreation. And all our projects are listed there. If you're registered for today, of course, you will have access to the YouTube playlist where there's a short video clip on each of the projects that were mentioned today. And they can contact the principal investigator of that project, whose name and email address is also there. Alternatively, if you don't find any project that interests you, please look at our Meet the Team on the website and have a look at our experts in FASREC and look at their specialization area and please contact them. Send an email and tell them you're interested and start a discussion. And should you want to apply, please do it online. The NWU have an online application system and you can submit your application by the 11th of September. They will collate all applications and send it through to me. We have a selection process for master's student, which will require you to write a short piece of information to see what your writing skills are. For our PhD candidates, we will receive or request a letter of reference from your previous supervisor, but we will ask for that. So they will have to give us the master's supervision contact details. And we hope to always inform you about the final outcome by the beginning of November, so that planning for 2022 can start. We do accept late applications on merit. So if all supervisors are filled up, so all spots are taken, of course then we can't accommodate more people, but if we do have some projects available still, we will consider.
Thank you, Hanli. The short message, ladies and gentlemen, is act now. If you are interested, the time is now and the time is here for you to apply. Just another reminder, go to our website at the university, www.nwu.ac.za. Go to Health Sciences, it's under the Teaching and Learning tab, and there under the research entities you'll find FASREC. and they have a website that can provide you with all the necessary information that you need. If you'd like to apply, do so at Postgraduate Studies on the university's website. Colleagues, thank you so much for your time, and for all those of you who signed in via Zoom. We'll be leaving you now to go back either to your research or of course to watching some netball a little bit later on today.
Work on our leisure time.
And work on leisure time, yes. Right, Tron. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. That's it from FASREC. We look forward to hearing from you.